Hi, my name is Morgan Aratola, and this is my video for the second case connections. I chose to answer questions 2 and 4. I'm starting with 4 just because that's the one I started working on, and it's the first in the script. So case 4 was a previously healthy 2-month-old female, presents with jittery spells after breastfeeding. Her mother reports she had not given the baby anything to eat other than breast milk since birth. The baby has only been sleeping for more than 2 hours between feedings, and that's when the mother reports the symptoms start. Lab results are consistent with hypoglycemia, low blood glucose, but are otherwise unremarkable. Epinephrine is administered and there is no increase in blood glucose, but there is an increase in blood lactate. Physical exam reveals a liver edge 4 centimeters below the right costal margin. Percussion of the right chest and abdomen confirms hepatomegaly. Blood glucose levels increase after breastfeeding, but she cannot maintain blood glucose levels during fasting. So based on this information, the first was hereditary fructose intolerance, and I did not believe this to be the correct answer. HFI is a genetic disorder, as all of these are, in which the body cannot synthesize fructose for energy. HFI is caused by a genetic mutation in the gene that codes for aldolase B, which is the second enzyme involved in metabolizing fructose. This enzyme is mostly found in the liver, and due to its inability to work, its precursing enzyme, fructose 1,6-phosphate, backs up in the liver, causing a decrease in overall cellular availability, hypoglycemia, and liver cell death. Now, this could kind of account for the presentation of hepatomegaly, but some of the other clues are more indicative of a different disease. So fructose is a dietary monosaccharide found in many plants, and along with glucose and galactose, it's absorbed into the blood upon digestion of your banana, apple, fruit. Dried figs are really high in fructose. We also make a synthetic version, high fructose corn syrup, which is exceptionally bad. So in HFI, the person is asymptomatic until they digest fructose, but in this case, the child is digesting or ingesting lactose from the mother's breast milk, and lactose is a disaccharide of glucose and galactose, but no fructose. So these symptoms associated with HFI also include vomiting and irritability, and this child, while irritable, has not had the fructose introduction, so that's why I believe it to not be that one. The second was galactosemia, and galactosemia is caused by a deficiency in one of the 3 enzymes. There's 3 enzymes basically that metabolize galactose, so any one of those enzymes can be missed or malformed. The most common type is termed classic galactosemia, and it's a deficiency in galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase, GALT. And the metabolism of galactose is a key step in continuing glycolysis to break down glucose and provide cellular energy. The presentation of galactosemia is seen really early in the newborn stage and can be fatal. Jaundice, so they would look yellow, is one of the primary signs, up to 74%. And this patient was not reported to have any signs of jaundice, which was another indicator that I did not feel that this was the issue. So I've also included a picture in my script of just normal galactose metabolism. And while ingestion of milk, like lactose, is composed of the disaccharides glucose and galactose, I don't believe this to be the primary diagnosis. So C, glycogen storage disease, this is what I believe to be the correct answer, and I chose this based on a lot of the presentation. So breast milk since birth, and while she's feeding, she's fine, but now we're getting into the stage where she's sleeping longer and not feeding as frequently, so in that fasted state, and that's where she can't seem to maintain her blood glucose. So people who have glycogen storage disease just do not have the enzymes to break down glycogen in order to utilize it for energy, or they can't synthesize glycogen from glucose in order to store it properly in the cells. So again, as with the others, there are multiple types of glycogen storage disorders, but with the lactic acidemia presented on top of the seemingly hepatomegaly and hypoglycemia during the fasted state, glycogen storage type 1, also known as von Gierke's disease, is most likely the cause based on presentation. And this disease is caused by a mutation in the G6PC gene, which codes for glucose 6-phosphate in order to produce glucose via the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. Because this is a key gluconeogenic step and it can't happen, you would see severe hypoglycemia, especially during the fasted state. And then with the administration of epi and the rise in blood lactate but not blood glucose further shows the pathway's inability to move glucose 6-phosphate to glucose because glucose 6-phosphatase is inactive. Epi should increase gluconeogenesis from the hepatic cells but is unable to do so. And I spelled from wrong, I put form. However, lactate can still be produced because glycolysis and the anaerobic fermentation pathway take their own direction, so they are not affected by this. Epinephrine stimulates glycogenolysis pathway, but as mentioned, that cannot be carried out, which is why epi does not affect blood glucose as it would in a normal response of that fight or flight, or by administering it. Very commonly with this von Gierke's disease, the child will have hypoglycemia, lactic acidosis, hyperlipidemia, enlarged liver, and the diagnosis is usually made around the age of 4 months, which is similar to her timeline, a little older, but she's in that fasting state. Next, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. I did not believe this to be the correct answer. It's another inborn error of metabolism that directly affects erythrocytes due to enzymatic dysfunction of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, and a person may be asymptomatic. They may have anemia, or in worst cases, they have chronic hemolysis. But G6PD is an enzyme in the pentose phosphate pathway, so another pathway, which is why I didn't believe this to be it. And it's responsible for the second oxidative step that reduces the amount of NADPH, which is critical in the production of glutathione peroxidase. And glutathione in erythrocytes is reduced via that G6PD, which they're missing, and an NADPH pathway. And it basically maintains, it kind of cleans up all of the free radicals, the hydrogen peroxide, and keeps the cell alive. So in this case, red blood cells lyse or die. And I included a picture of the pathway. Okay, so case 2, a 5-year-old boy brought to the pediatrician's office for his annual visit, and the mother reports he's been sickly, drowsy, persistent thirst, and frequent urination, which are key points. And then it gives us blood samples. So what is the information likely to suggest about the underlying biochemical basis for this patient? And the patient's symptoms, sorry, I'm trying to flip to case 3. This is case 3. The patient's symptoms indicate type 1 diabetes from a very quick glance. Common symptoms include increased thirst, hunger, blurred vision, fatigue, and weight loss. And this is all attributed to massive amounts of excess blood glucose in the blood, and the cells not being able to utilize it. So the initial serum insulin level is low, which does not match up with the increased likely fasting blood glucose. They should rise together, fall together. The initial, and then that indicates an insulin error or mechanism with insulin. So a normal fasting insulin level is 3 to 8, and our patient had 0.8, so quite low. And insulin is normally secreted by the beta isolate cells of the pancreas, but in type 1 diabetes, due to autoimmune disorders, our bodies literally attack our cells, and the beta cells are either destroyed or just not workable. So during times of excess glucose, insulin acts on the liver to begin making glycogen so that it can store and take up that excess glucose via glycogenesis, but this can't happen without insulin. So for this patient, I would suspect the fasting blood glucose levels to be very high. Hyperglycemic, 180 to 300 is not uncommon in someone with this. And the normal range is 80 to 100. So we really regulate tightly our own blood glucose in a perfect setting. So this would indicate that things are not going well. And glucose uptake from the blood into the muscle cells and adipose tissue is governed by insulin. And so again, we would expect to see that rise when you gave the patient a glucose load, and it really did not rise that much. Liver enzymes with type 1 diabetes are the most common biomarkers to basically say that the liver is just being bombarded with sugar, and it's really damaging on liver and kidneys, heart. People with chronic hyperglycemia are at risk for myocardial infarction. So it's a really bad scenario, and the only way to control it is to give insulin. So some of the liver enzymes that are most often elevated are aspartate aminotransferase, alanine aminotransferase, alkaline phosphatase. Hyperglycemia also activates glycogen synthase, which is a key enzyme in glycogenesis. And lastly, with a deficiency in insulin, the tissue metabolism of glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis lead to elevated blood glucose and glucosuria, which accounts for the frequent urination as with this patient. Thank you.